Today is Palm Sunday, and the reading for this Sunday is in the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 21, verses 1 to 16. Due to the impact of the coronavirus, our lives changed completely in the last weeks. Many of us might be living in a comfortable situation, maybe planning holidays, new adventure, or a new job, and then everything changed, and we still do not know all the consequences of this pandemic for our country and communities. Many of the certainties that we might have now are gone. The story of the Holy Week is a story of change as well. Jesus is proclaimed King on the Palm Sunday and then crucified on Friday. The events of Palm Sunday are vital to understand Holy Week. According to Matthew, there were two main happenings on that day. Jesus' triumphant entry into Jerusalem and his cleansing of the temple. Both are deeply related. To fully grasp the meaning of these events, we need to look at the context. In Jesus' time, there was a wide expectation of the coming of the Messiah. Israel was under the Roman Empire's rule for decades, and they were desperate for freedom. Especially among the poor and marginalized people, there was the expectation of a Messiah who would bring the rule of God, the kingdom of God to Israel. However, there were many different views on how the Messiah would reign and what his role would be into the new kingdom. Many thought of him as a prophet superior to Moses and Elijah, the great prophets of ancient Israel. Others would see the Messiah as the high priest, superior to Aaron and all the Levites. In another very popular view was that he would be a king, descending from the King David, and he would conquer Rome with a powerful army, and he would destroy all his enemies. Some people would believe that the Messiah would be a king and a priest at the same time. And many would believe that he would be all three: king, a priest, and a prophet. During his ministry, many identified Jesus as the Messiah. However, there were some arguments against the view that Jesus could be the Messiah. One of these arguments was that Jesus did not have the skill to gather and lead a powerful army in battle. For many, the way that Jesus welcomed the outcast, the poor, the children, the women, and all the marginalized people was against the expectations of the role of the Messiah. How could he be a priest if he was constantly breaking some rules of purity and touching people who were impure? How could Jesus be a prophet if he preached a message of forgiveness and eating and drinking with the sinners that was far from the robust message of judgment and punishment for the sinners that they expect from a messianic prophet. How could Jesus be a king if he preached about loving the enemy, serving rather than being served, and that he himself would be tortured and killed? On the other hand, there were strong arguments to defend Jesus as the promised Messiah, the God's Christ. His signs, healings, and exorcisms made many believe that he was sent by God. His words were very powerful, and he demonstrated a deep knowledge of things that was superior to the knowledge of the scribes and law teachers they knew. In the way that Jesus spoke about purity as purity of the heart rather than an external and superficial purity resonates with many of Jesus' followers. Some of Jesus' followers were slowly starting to understand that Jesus was the Messiah, but certainly not the Messiah that most people would expect to come. Jesus was presenting himself as a Messiah whose strength was demonstrated in his weakness, his purity in welcoming sinners, and the power of his message was revealed through the simplicity of his words and the love of his actions. During his ministry, Jesus gathered a good number of disciples. Very often, crowds would assemble to hear his words and ask for his help. When he went into Jerusalem, many of his followers were very excited and believed that that moment would be the turn point of Jesus' ministry. In other words, at that moment, the crowds, even with different expectations and contrasting views about him, came together to acclaim him as the Messiah, as the new king. It does not mean that the majority of the people was convinced that Jesus was the Messiah. Probably not so many, but now there was a greater group who admitted that he was the Messiah. Jesus entered the capital Jerusalem riding a donkey. It is the first time that Jesus is not traveling or entering a village or town on foot. Certainly, it's not the glorious entry of a powerful king riding a white war horse, as it was a normal inauguration of a new king. But it is an account of a royal inauguration ceremony. Jesus is assuming his role as the king of God's kingdom. He enters as a king, but as a meek king. The crowds acknowledge his act and acclaim him as the promised and expected messianic king. After that, he went into the temple and drove out all those who were buying and selling there. He was assuming his role as the priest who is responsible for God's temple. He is the one who cleanses and keeps the temple sacred and pure. The blind and the crippled came to him into the temple and he healed them. blind and lame people were not allowed into the temple. And again, Jesus is reversing the concept of purity. He is making the impure pure, changing the meaning of purity. The children shout, praise to their son. Jesus argues against the chief priests and the teachers of the law. He is a prophet, but his message is precisely against those who had the power to decide who is a true prophet. Jesus heals those without status, the blind and the lame, and was praised by those without power, the children. In the Palm Sunday, Jesus is revealed as the Messiah, the prophet, the king, and the priest. But this day also reveals what kind of king he is. He is the meek king who would reign with humility and love. He is the prophet of forgiveness and love for the outcome. And he is the priest who receives the marginalized and heals them. We may not get the point if we think that Jesus preached a spiritual kingdom rather than a political one. It's true that he did not preach to take over the Roman Empire, gathering a powerful army, but all his acts are clearly and deeply political. Not only when he entered in Jerusalem riding a donkey, but also when he went into the temple and drove out the sellers and overturned the tables of the money changers. In Jesus' time, religion and politics were profoundly related and could not be separated. The fact that he overturned tables and drove out some people did not mean that he endorsed violence, though. There is a huge difference between Jesus' acts in the temple and the expectations of the Messiah destroying the Roman Empire with a powerful army. But still, Jesus is proclaiming a kingdom where politicians cannot determine that some people may be marginalized or despised. Jesus is proclaiming a kingdom where everyone is welcome and those without power are empowered to resist unfairness, to fight against injustice, and to strive for right. Jesus' political manifesto is made clear on this Sunday before Easter. But as we know, the events after that day, the crowds did not understand the meaning of what Jesus was doing and preaching. They could not grasp the real meaning of priesthood, prophecy, and kingdom that Jesus was bringing to them. They did not understand what kind of king Jesus was. But the question is, do we understand the political, religious, and social implications of proclaiming Jesus as king, priest, and prophet? Palm Sunday is a turn point in Jesus' ministry. On that day, the human expectations of a kingdom achieved by the power of weapons faded away, and the new kingdom started to take shape. It was a day of glory and celebration, but it was the beginning of a time of suffering and death. Looking at our context, this story has a lot to say. The conflicts that Jesus saw in his context are not totally over. We still have people suffering and being marginalized. With the coronavirus, we know that the people who will be affected most are the most vulnerable. Jesus was proclaimed king on this Sunday, and then a few days later, he was crucified. Probably people among the crowd who were shouting praise to David's son now were among those who shouted crucify him a few days later. The question is, if we acknowledge and recognize the value and the meaning of God's kingdom for our lives. Amen.
Meekness and majesty, manhood and deity, in perfect harmony, the man who is God, Lord of eternity, dwells in humanity, kneels in humility, and washes our feet. Oh, what a mystery, meekness and majesty. Bow down and worship, for this is your God. This is your God. Father's pure radiance, perfect in innocence, yet loves obedience to death on a cross, suffering to give us life, conquering through sacrifice, and as they crucify, praise Father for me. Oh, what a mystery, meekness and majesty. Bow down and worship, for this is your God. This is your God. Wisdom unsearchable, God the invisible, love indestructible, and frailty